All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, hosted by the Pride Franchise Leadership Council at the IFA, the International Franchise Association. We are so delighted to have such a great turnout for such an important conversation that we are hosting here at the IFA Foundation. For those of you who don't know about the IFA Foundation, the mission of the foundation is to raise awareness of the franchise business model and help connect people to the amazing opportunities that exist in the veteran communities and underrepresented communities and diverse communities and in all communities, and help them understand the powerful tool that is franchising to realize small business ownership dreams. As part of that, the IFA Foundation works with programs called our VetFran program, where we reach out to veteran communities, in our Diversity Institute, where we reach out to underrepresented communities of all backgrounds in all communities to raise awareness of franchising. And we focus a lot on community because we know our franchise businesses are so engaged in their communities. They are leaders in their communities. And we know that they are change agents in so many ways. So at our Diversity Institute in particular, one of the things that we've been leaning into in the past couple of years is building our affinity groups and helping to nurture networking, idea sharing, best practices, and looking at future trends about what business growth is going to look like from all different facets of franchising in particular. So I'm delighted today to and give thanks to our Pride Franchise Leadership Council for convening this conversation today, which is going to be a conversation with Rob Smith, CEO and founder of the Phluid Project. So we are so delighted to have you here and sharing information with us. And a little bit about the Pride Franchise Leadership Council. So the Pride Franchise Leadership Council is near and dear to my heart, as it was our inaugural affinity group within the IFA and within the IFA community. Leaning in to convene critical conversations both within franchise brands and then outward to stakeholders and the public to talk about issues and opportunities about the LGBTQ community within franchising and how we can all support each other and lean forward to create change and create a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. So I'm so delighted that they're hosting this last webinar for us in 2022, but we hope it very much is the first of many conversations to come on this important discussion for engaging this broader community in franchising and the wonderful tool that it is. So to turn it over to those who are going to be leading us in the conversation today, I'm delighted to turn it over to Michelle Rowan. She's president and COO of Franchise Business Review. And so Michelle, I am delighted to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ricky. So yes, I'm Michelle Rowan with Franchise Business Review, and I am so excited that Paul Pickett, one of the co-founders and co-chairs of the Pride Council, asked me to join this conversation. And I'm going to introduce Rob Smith. He's the CEO and founder, as Ricky mentioned, of the Phluid Project, Get Phluid, and the Phluid Foundation. We are going to be sharing this recording with you. We're going to put links to all of these very important websites in the chat box as well. But we want to answer your questions. So throw them in chat as we get started. We'll ask them as we can, and we can also do a Q&A at the end. So we want you to get the most out of the time that we have with Rob today. And we're so thankful that he was willing to join us. His background includes over 30 years in retail, working on multi-billion-dollar businesses through merchandising, e-commerce, marketing, product development, and supply chain management. Brands like Macy's, Victoria's Secret, Nike, Levi's, Hurley, and Converse. So this is a man who knows what he's doing. So ask him his questions, everybody. So the Phluid Project is the world's first gender-free store and a movement dedicated to challenging limiting gender stereotypes. We've got Paul Pickett as a model today with some of their awesome stuff. The Phluid Foundation is creating positive change through action, through cultural awareness, advocacy, and support for community-based mutual aid initiatives. And the Phluid Foundation strives to lift up those in the LGBTQIA+ community who need a voice. We are really so lucky to have him talking to us all in franchising as we all try and navigate how important this is to our business and the work that he's doing with leading teams and thinking about how we support the people that we lead and our customers. So I just want to start with, you're obviously very passionate about this topic, Rob. So what was the motivation to kind of leave your day job and start all this stuff that you're doing today? What was that tipping point to get you into and making this your main gig?
Boy, can I be honest? It was let's see, how do I say this without sounding crazy? It was my first Burning Man. I went to my first Burning Man, and there was something about the construct of 75,000 people and radical inclusion and accepting of people and giving and caring, and just, people got to be who they wanted to be. Nobody said you couldn't dress this way. You just got to live your wildest, most fantastical self. And I just loved everything about it. And I came back and said, how can I make this part of my life? And so I quit my job. I traveled around the world for almost 6 months. And on that journey, Phluid was born. And Fluid's really emerging in my profession, which is retail, and my passion, which is social justice, and together creating Phluid. And so that's how it started. I figured I did the corporate thing long enough, and I want to do something on my own. I thought I might be a politician, actually. I'm glad I'm not. I'm glad I'm doing this instead. It seems a little easier than being a politician, but I do appreciate politicians.
Well, definitely more, I think, opportunity to bring people together than politicians these days. So I think that there's probably a lot of great ideas that have come out of Burning Man. It's a very creative space. So that doesn't surprise me. It's very cool. So I know that, and I'm hoping that people have showed up to this conversation that might be uncomfortable or might be not ready for this. But we really want to talk about why this is so important to business, to have these conversations and to have more understanding about what you are doing specifically with these projects. So I loved when you started when we started talking, and I checked out your TED Talks and all of that, why it's important to focus on Gen Z, or how Gen Z is different in their expectations of what they're looking for in a workplace and where they shop too.
Yeah, well, first of all, they're massive. They're in around 25% of the US population, but are almost a third of the world's population. So they're a massive, I mean, if you're thinking about their spend is like, since boomers, we haven't seen a generation with this kind of spending. And they're also very interesting. If you have a young person in your life, a Gen Z or young millennial, they're kind of clumped together. They are very they believe in inclusion. They believe in equity. They believe in the environment. They believe in social justice for everyone, and they're willing to make that their brand and their platform to talk about these issues. So they care about it. And something like 77% of Gen Zers will look at a company's inclusion policies to decide where they'll go to work or not go to work. And we all know this is a time where recruitment and retention is a priority for all of us. So this is about recruiting and retaining young people. However, I'll be honest, we also have 5 generations working together, probably the first time ever, between Gen Zers and boomers. So how do you strike the balance where you're not alienating one generation to include another? I think it's important to understand that.
Awesome.
Which is
Paul,
Yeah. Thank you.
By the way, I just want to say thank you for everyone who's tuned in. I didn't get a chance to say that. I always am amazed that people take an hour out of their day to listen and to potentially learn. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and to everybody for tuning in. It's humbling.
Well, we're thrilled to have you again. I'm so appreciative. Especially when you're in retail in December, it's a little insane for us. So taking an hour away is so.
I hope people are eating lunch right now, maybe at least taking a break. Yeah.
So thoughtful. Could you take just a second to unpack the 3 different companies, the Phluid Foundation, the Phluid Project, and Get Phluid, so people really understand maybe just the breadth and scope of the 3 companies?
Sure. I'll just go back in time. So first of all, I decided to open a store that was free of gender. So that meant that clothing was all mixed up, and accessories and shoes, and there was no men's or women's section. It was just clothes and fashion, and 2/3 of the store was retail, and 1/3 was a community space, which meant I had a coffee shop and bleacher seating and tables. And during the day, people hung out there and did their homework and just knew they could see a friend. And at night, that space became an event space. We had 250 events in 2 years in that space, just from fashion shows and panel discussions and comedy night and poetry reading, and just almost every night there was something happening. And people, it really helped me build or understand a community, I guess I would say, and if you talk about humility, like when I decided to open Phluid, I hired a coach because I wanted to make sure as a gay man that I was up on the language. And I got this coach and sat down for an hour and I was like, can you go back tomorrow? Because there was all of these words that had either existed before, but I didn't know about them, or there, as language always evolves, new words to identify a person. So it took me 10 hours to be able to get close to being able to talk about all of the different subsets of communities and break it down. So yeah, just for somebody who thought I knew everything, I knew nothing. And so I went into Phluid learning so much. And then in the store, I was able to, one of our social codes is we're all students and we're all teachers. And for 2 years, I sat there as a student and I learned and I built relationships and I got to know a young generation, every single day, each relationship. And I grew a lot in those 2 years. It was as much a retail space, also a laboratory for people to take a concept and like go, what does this mean? And walk in and see dresses and see makeup and go, and then kind of get it. But it was also just a great opportunity for me to grow and to learn in this space and to really understand Gen Zers. One of my favorite stories is a parent brought their young child in and they're like, can you believe this? Isn't this amazing? And the kid was like, yeah, why? What's the big deal? Like to them, it was like, duh. 56% of Gen Zers shop across gender lines already. So they're already doing it in thrift stores. They're doing it all over. They're kind of like, they're indifferent about it. And so to this kid, it was kind of like, whatever. It wasn't a big deal, but their parent was like, this is amazing. So it just shows the difference in generations.
So did the opening of the retail store then evolve into the Phluid Foundation side of it? And
yeah. So the
Phluid?
journey is like many people, as a store owner, as a self-funder. Nobody really invested in me. I invested in myself. I thought everyone would think I was so smart, but investing in something that's never been done before, it's hard to find investors. So I to be honest, I lost a lot of money on the store. I'd do it all over again, but I lost a lot of my own personal money. But like I say, when I closed the store after 2 years, like one door closed, but then tons of doors open. So, just the brand had been established. And it was a kind of an interesting time when I closed the store. COVID kicked in and then Black Lives Matter kicked in. And I was trying to find my relevance and, all of this. And then after, we kind of had a racial reckoning, people were like, well, what's next? And that was a great opportunity because I started to put together. So what I did was I took the catalog of all the t-shirts and all the graphics we did and put it together. And Target, just when you think things are going bad, Target calls and says, hey, listen, we've never had a LGBTQ brand in our Pride assortment before. Would you be interested? So I had a catalog, shared it with them. I'm like, wow, why don't I just share this with Macy's and Kohl's? And yeah, in the first year, we ended up in 8,000 doors across the country in the first year. So like I said, one door closed and 8,000 open. We'll be at 15,000 next year, which is super exciting. But yeah, I didn't see that coming. It was not part of the plan. My plan was to open 13 stores around the world. You just, when you get in the flow of life and you let the universe or God or whoever you believe in or don't believe in, but understand that there's something guiding you. If you resist it, it's not going to work, but just to sit there and to go with it. That was a hard lesson, but boy, has it turned out to be something special. And then, I created Get Phluid, which is gender expansive training, because I started speaking around, like going on the road and speaking at conferences and boardrooms. And I thought, wow, can I take the knowledge I have and help corporations become better in this space? So that's where Get Phluid started, and the Phluid Foundation I can talk about later, which is a nonprofit. So, and then coming soon, Phluid City in the metaverse, which is exciting.
So Rob, I think this is a good segue into a question that was asked too, where you talked about the training that you're doing. So we are going to share slides after, but what I loved in the slides that you had is that you kind of set your strategic priorities, that really what you call as your North Star and how you guided it. And so we have someone that asked about, they've been recently reading an article that talks about even companies that have large budgets to put towards DEI are still getting it wrong. So it's when you look at kind of whether it's a small budget, it's a big budget, what are the areas, what are the buckets that you think are the most important to spend your money and your time on, as you think about how do you start getting more involved in having these conversations or educating people in your brand?
Yeah. So I'll divide that answer into two different ways. First of all, when we go into a company, we say, they say, what do you think? I like to start off first by myself training the C-suite. And when I train the C-suite, I come and I do like a abbreviated version of education. But really, I know that they have to be bought in, because if ideas are being percolated and coming up, they get shot down and then people get frustrated. So getting the C-suite bought in is first and foremost the most important thing. And I go into education, but then I go into a SWOT analysis and let them know what their competitors are doing and other people are doing. And then I go into what are the challenges and what are the opportunities, and try to turn it into a business opportunity discussion instead of a DEI discussion. Because sometimes you lose people when you're talking about DEI. They're like, it's fluffy stuff. And I'm looking at it as, hey, listen, here's an opportunity to, let's say in fashion, have a male space and a female space and a space in the middle, that you eliminate the duplication on both sides, create a new space, and you get a whole new customer. So, potentially increase business. And then we go into Gender 101, which is basically the 1 hour version, and get as many people interested in that as possible, and to tape it. And then we get into, which is really the most important thing, which is changing culture. So you can educate people, but to change culture is harder. And I think that's where people miss it. They think if you just do an education, you're good. It actually takes, I always say, like, Martin Luther King Jr. never got across the bridge in Selma until white people marched with the Black community. And that's how cultural change happens, is when other people are advocates. They understand enough, they can learn, they can advocate on your behalf. It's a lot to ask of a small group of people who are underrepresented to have that burden to just be the only one who's going to go advocate for yourself. So having your peers support you makes a huge difference. That's where culture and change happens.
Right. It turns it from addition to exponential multiplication is when you get your allies involved, because then it validates and it pushes the envelope, and it makes the fun story. So when I worked at Macy's, we launched employee resource groups, and I was the only openly gay person in the C-suite, and there was certainly, I don't think, any people of color, very few women. This was years ago, and one of the employee resource groups was women of color, and they were looking for a senior sponsor for each of them. And I chose, instead of LGBTQ, I chose women of color. And I did that because I thought, wow, what a great opportunity for me to show support and, be there as an advocate, as a minority, to support another group of minority folks. And I'll tell you what, like 18 months later, they closed the door. They said, you know what, you've sat here for 18 months, month after month, and we trust you. And we would like to tell you what racism looks like in this company. And I knew it existed because the turnover was so high amongst people of color, higher than any other group. So what I learned was invaluable, but also to put myself in a place and to sit and just to listen and to not take up space and not have the answers. I think that's really a powerful place to be. And I grew so much in that process.
So Rob, I think
it takes vulnerability to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that you're speaking to what we're talking about too, is how are ways that we show up to advocate and to show that we're allies. And I think starting with the ideas around how can we handle the conversation when we're talking to people and they start with the, I don't get the they, them thing. I don't understand with, that are resistant to that change. What are ways that we could maybe open up their minds to how they could look at it differently?
Yeah, sometimes I tell my trainers, like, imagine you're a Christian and you're going to a group of Islam people who are Islam, and you're not going to try to convert them. You're just going to educate them, and you may not believe in it, but it's good to be informed of other people's identities, and just so you can be informed. And so so they, them, let's get right into that. So they, them as a pronoun. So I use he, they as a pronoun. I'm not non-binary. I use they because they is actually a really good word, and we use it if we don't know someone's identity. We use it 90% of the time. And a good example is if I found this cell phone in an Uber, I go, oh my God, somebody left their cell phone in this Uber. They're going to be so upset when they find out that they lost it. I can't wait to get back to them. They'll be so ecstatic when they find that they got it back. We know it's one person's phone, right? And so, but we use it naturally. And another example I use is, I was listening to a podcast and they were saying, well, this issue with the inflation, whoever the next president is, he's going to have to deal with this problem because it's not going to go away. And they gendered the next president. And I thought, what if they just said, they're going to have to deal with this? And there's a whole lot of gender socialization around professions, around lots of different things. If you see a doctor come in and it's a female doctor, you're like, oh, it's a female doctor. So we should not be surprised by that, but we've been conditioned to think that nurses are women, doctors are men. And when you start to say, hey, listen, I'd love to see the doctor whenever they're available, tell them I'd like to see them. And you start to deconstruct a lot of things when you use they, them as a pronoun. So if someone doesn't know my pronoun just because of the way I look, I encourage people to use they, them. It's much easier, and we use it much more often than we think we do. However, let's say, for instance, Paul's new to the team, and Paul identifies, I hear from colleagues, as they, them. And they, them is the space between male and female. And I'll get into that later, like where it comes from. But I would say, if I have a hard time, and most people generationally, it doesn't even matter if you're gay or straight or whatever you are, like most people who are a certain generation, 17-year-olds like think nothing twice about it. Like, they're like, geez, what's the big deal? But if Paul said, I'd walk up to Paul and say, hey, Paul, my name is Rob. I use he, him pronouns. I understand you use they, them pronouns. It's still, I'm still not very comfortable with it, but if I ever misgender you, I apologize in advance, and I'll do my best to make you feel affirmed and seen to this company, because we value you, and we're grateful that you're on the team. So let's say that you have a really hard time with they, them. Don't avoid the person. That's discrimination. What you might want to do instead is say, hey, where's Paul? I haven't seen Paul for a while. Next time you see Paul, tell Paul, I'd love to see Paul. And by the way, people in our company, and there's tons of non-binary people, misgender people all the time. What you don't want to do is say, hey, I haven't seen Paul for a while. If you see him, if you see them, I hate when I do that. I consistently miss it. I'm so sorry. And you don't just like move on past it quickly. Yeah. Or if you hear somebody misgender somebody, just shoot them a text like, hey, you just misgendered Paul 4 times in the meeting. You'd be like, oh yeah, please. Don't shame somebody, just help.
Yeah, well, and that's I think that goes to that point of being vulnerable and asking people to call you out when you make those mistakes. So even if you're
subtly and quietly, yes.
Yes. And that's the thing, like call people out privately, but also too, if you don't have a space where you feel comfortable letting everyone kind of call you out on it, you can pick 2 or 3 key people on your team to just be like, hey, let's check each other when there's opportunities to reframe things. And I think that's a great
one of the things that you don't want to do, which people do all the time, is they go, I haven't seen Paul for a while. I mean, they have been here almost all the time, but whenever they show up and they kind of, it's like, oh my goodness, and people are like so proud of themselves too, because they're like, yes, I got it. I did it. And it becomes this long, it's just funny. It's just, but give yourself grace all the time and give yourself grace, because it's a shift, we're constantly in a state of unlearning and relearning our whole lives. Even when this group of women of color, and I said, okay, we're being honest right now, right? So is it Black or African American? I'm like, I just got to ask this question. And they went around the room and almost everyone had a different answer. I'm Jamaican American, I'm African American, I'm Black, almost everyone had a different answer. And I'm like thinking to myself, well, that doesn't make it very easy for me. But I'm like, but your job is not to make life easy for me. And it's me to say, how would you like to be, what is your racial identity? How do you like to be referred to as? And just that simple, and hardly, they're not going to call you a racist if you just ask the question in a very authentic way.
Well, it gets to the point our job is to make it easier for others, especially if you're in any leadership capacity, or even just in a friend or family capacity. I mean, your job.
Yeah. And by the way, just straight white guys are not the ones responsible. We're all responsible, right? We're all responsible to, to support each other. And I think so much like kind of pressure gets put on straight white men, and we got to like get past that. We got to understand that we all show up with our own individuality, our own things that make us special, and every one of us are unique and special. And you may be a person who people don't know has a disability. It's a hidden disability, and that's something to be aware of. Or a veteran that you mentioned veterans, but there's lots of where you may have a parent who has is suffering from dementia, whatever it is. There's lots of things that you come and you want to just try to be as empathetic as possible. And if there's words that can make someone feel more affirmed and feel better about going to work every day, why not want to be that person? I want to be that person. I want to be that person.
Yeah. I always say that, like, I just want people to feel better leaving interactions with me or my brand than they had before. So I have, can
we talk about the they them, where that comes from?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to break that down for people in a very simple way. So you may not agree with it, and that's okay, because 80% of boomers don't, but 80% of Gen Zers do. So it's this like shift that gender is a spectrum, that there are, for me, like when I was a kid, because I didn't throw very well and I like to play with dolls, I was a queer or a sissy, it was kind of like all of that was just whatever it was lumped into one bucket. And now there's like this kind of like breaking apart and giving people more nuanced words for who they are. So this starts off with your sex assigned at birth, like what the doctor looks at you and says, looks between your legs and like male, female, and checks a box. And then there is your identity, which may or may not match your sex. And there's two words that I like to teach you and where they come from. One is called cisgender. If anyone's ever heard that word, and I used it for a year and didn't even know what it meant, but I knew kind of what it meant, which means I identify as male and I was born as male. So I'm cisgender. Cis is Latin for same as. And there are other folks who are born male or female and they're transgender, which means opposite is Latin for opposite of. And so that their gender identity does not match their sex assigned at birth. And then there is your sexual orientation. And that is who you choose to have intimate relationships with. That could be gay, straight, bi, pan, which includes more folks. And then there's your gender expression. So your gender expression, like me wearing nail polish today, does not necessarily mean that I'm like to have sex with men or identify as non-binary or anything else other than I just thought I looked good in this nail polish, but we tend to like kind of draw these dots together so they can all coexist or intersect. But just just know that that's where it comes from. And so the idea of gender being a social construct is that girls wear pink dresses, girls play with dolls, girls do this, and boys act a certain way and are expected to be a certain way, societal expectations. And non-binary folks look at male and female and say, yeah, I'm not that girl, but I'm kind of like that guy. So they find themselves in the middle of what society says gender is. We call them maybe tomboys. When you're young, at least I think girls had better names than boys did. We're a little more harsher, although some girls didn't want to be called tomboys. But yeah, it didn't mean that you wanted to have sex with women when you were up. We're not thinking about sex when you look at an 8-year-old. You're thinking about how they're presenting themselves, and they may look at the kids' floor and look at the girls' floor and the boys' floor and say, I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't necessarily belong on one side or the other. And that's the idea where the spectrum comes in. Fluid is the space between, two binary spaces. That's why fluid is the idea that you can maybe look outside your box, be a little curious and go, just because I was told to be this way in this box, maybe there's more of me outside of this box that I might find my authentic self if I got curious and looked outside. And you might go back to your box, but lots of things are constructs. Lots of things we tell people how to act with certain constructs. And so, yeah, that's it. So yeah, so lots of our trainers, they get out this chart and they're like, when it comes to my gender, I'm somewhere here, but it changes sometimes. And my sexual orientation, it changes. It's somewhere in the spectrum here. And so young people live in the spectrum. It's really fascinating. 21% of adult Gen Zers identify as LGBTQ, which is amazing, nearly a full quarter. That's a Gallup poll, which is amazing to think about how many now people are starting to think about sexual orientation as fluid. Was that helpful? Okay, I'm going to make it super simple. This is the last thing I'll say. So your gender identity is who you go to bed as. Your sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. And that's how to break up the two differences.
I like it. I like the simplicity of it too. It makes it easy to grab onto. In business.
No, you may or may not agree with it. And you may say, you know what, Rob, gender is sex, the same thing. I don't want to hear anything about it. You're a boy or a girl. And that's, what, I may not be able to change your opinion at all, but have you understand what other people are thinking when they're identifying themselves and they're finding a word that goes, yes, finally, there's a word that describes who I am. And that's how many people feel, that finally there's a word that describes how they identify, how they fit in the world.
Well, as you said before we got started today, just the understanding of it is the biggest part of the battle. Understanding it, understanding why it's important, understanding how it affects others and how it affects your brand, how it affects you, that is a long way down the path. So
yeah.
I don't want to steal from your training, but 3 things that a brand can do to express its fluid friendliness, its gender inclusivity to its potential and existing employees and its potential and existing customers. If you just had
you could ensure that a job application has a third gender on it, a third gender marker. It actually goes back. When I traveled to India and then my big trip, there was male, female, other. The third gender goes back 4,000 years. It goes back to 2,000 years with indigenous peoples. It's always been there. And on immigration forms, it still exists in many countries in Eastern part of the world, which is really fascinating. So putting a third gender signals to somebody that you are aware of how young people, just know all young people, when they go to college, first day of class, they say their name and their pronouns. So they're already going from college. Now they're going to go to work. And so you're signaling to them that this is a place that we recognize that. And then if you choose to, some companies allow people to put their pronouns on their name badge or something like that. I would not make it mandatory. It's first of all, a person who's not binary might not want to do it. A person who doesn't believe that gender is a construct might not want to do it. So it should just be an optional thing, but that would be another thing to do. And then I would encourage educational courses, and educate the teams, but don't put so much responsibility. So many companies that I've gone to, I found one person who is trans or non-binary, and the entire company is putting all of the education on, and also all of the all the paperwork, everything that they need to do to be inclusive on this one person. And they're like, I have a job, and plus they don't want to get up on stage and exploit their personal stories for the behalf of everybody else. It's a lot to ask of people. Some people are willing to do it, but a lot of people aren't and shouldn't have to do it.
Yeah. So Rob, I would like to jump in.
Is that a good three? Is that a good three?
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's a great three. So we have a question that talks about companies that really just kind of talk about this or promote it during specific months of the year where it seems to be talked about more in the media. So I kind of want to take that question because she is somebody within the LGBTQI community. If you're not in a leadership position, if you're in a culture, if you like your job, if you like what you do, if you're in a culture where the company isn't taking it serious, or the founders, the leaders haven't jumped in to do this kind of training, do you have any suggestions on how you can make this a more important conversation, or how you can bring your feedback and be heard? And I think that there's probably a fear, well, if you're okay identifying that this is part of your community, but there's probably a fear that you're seen as aggressive, or you're seen as, kind of negative, or stirring up trouble. What are ways that you could kind of approach your team to talk about this, or to shed more light on the importance of it, or just start somewhere in the company if you're not the decision maker?
So there are the three A's. There are allies who say, I recognize you, and I will do my best to recognize you. There are advocates who say, I am a person who has a position in this company. I don't like the other P word, so I like to use other words other than the P word because it's triggering for people. And I don't, honestly, it's opportunity. Let's use the word opportunity. You have a good opportunity because of your position in the company. And then you might have an ear because you're more of a senior leader. You've been at the company longer. You have a good reputation. So as an advocate, you may go to human resources and say, hey, listen, I think we should do this. And go to somebody who you trust and you could converse with. And maybe several people come together. It's not just you, but you're pushing it. And then there is an activist. An activist is somebody who's willing to put their job on the line, to put their reputation on the line, and say, if we don't do this, this is not the kind of company I want to work for. I don't think you need to do that. I don't think that's necessary unless you feel that strongly about it. We have our jobs to think about, our companies, but I do think that if enough people come together as not the group of people who identify as that group, but another group of people who are well-informed, you learn and you sit down and you do your own education. We learned that with Black Lives Matter. And then you sit down and say, how can we support you? And sit there and listen, and then say, and then go act on that behalf and start to create change. You might get shut down, but 6 months later, they might come back and say, you know what, we're thinking about what you said, and we think it actually is time to do that. But come with the benefits. Numbers always speak. If you use some of the numbers that I share with you, sit down with those numbers and say, we want to be the best company and recruit the best people, that this is part of the way we're going to do it.
And just a note, we will be sharing with all the attendees the slide deck that Rob provided to us. So all of those numbers are included along with a lot of these definitions. And
yeah,
so
it's a very abbreviated. It's an abbreviated
again.
Ally, advocate, activist.
Got it.
I think I'm an activist. I was an ally and an advocate most of my life. I think you kind of progress. But not everybody wants to get arrested in front of the White House. You know what I mean? So some people have the position that they can do that, but not everybody. It's not for everybody. I don't recommend everybody become activists, but an advocate is a really powerful, very powerful position to be in.
I love it. We've talked a little bit before the presentation, but this data is almost impossible to grab onto. But are there any specifics that you have, even if it's anecdotal, of companies who have embraced this gender inclusivity that have seen changes in top line revenue?
We know that inclusive companies with inclusive leaders do 15% better than other companies that don't have inclusive teams. right now we're doing a study next year to talk about how addressing gender in language can actually have a positive impact on many people. And I'll use an example. So we worked with American Express, we worked with a lot of companies around language. And, you know, one of the things they were getting letters from people like, please don't address me as Mr. or Mrs., you know, or Ms. or whatever, just like call me Rob Smith, not Mr. Robert Smith. So just dropping that started to like kind of break that down. And then and then when I called American Express, they're like, hello, Robert, how would you like me to refer to you as? And I said, Rob. So the window of the system is Rob. So next time I call, it's like, hi, Rob, you know, so nobody, I mean, how many women with deep voices named Sandy are like, hello, sir, you know, like that's painful. Like there are so many ways that these things impact people. And I'll do the sir and the ma'am. If anyone's from the South, I apologize, but I don't want to be called sir. I know about you. I know many people don't want to be called ma'am. That's like our moms and our dads. So I mean, it's hard because sir and ma'am is very polite, but you could just say, how was your day? Or how can I help you? You know, as opposed to hello, sir, hello, ma'am. I know what happens to me when I worked with a company and I would be just, I was consulting. So I was walking around the store and every time I walk in the women's section, they're like, positive intent. They're like, just want to let you know, sir, that this is the women's department. The men's department's upstairs. Instead of saying like, you know, how are you doing today? Like, are you looking for a gift today? You know, is this just in, you know, just maybe they're shopping for themselves. Maybe they're shopping, but I just think there's different ways to approach people that doesn't alienate people. And yeah, but also, you know, I understand too, like there's just, it's so ingrained in our system to say sir and ma'am and Mr. and Mrs. But if you're divorced as a female, I don't think you would be called Mrs. And it's going to be pretty painful every time you do. So yeah, so it impacts all of us. So can we start to like pull words out, maybe replace them, maybe just eliminate them altogether? So a good one's like, hey guys, what's going on? Some people think guys is a bit of a, I think it's like the smallest problem we have in the world, but I say, hey friends, nice to see you. Hey folks, thanks for joining. Just to de-gender salutation. And people are like, oh, that's so cool. Like, you know, I just say, what's up team? And different words.
Right. It's important, but it's important to, if you,
you know, that's going to be like
change.
Changing the American flag for me. Like it's going to be hard, but it's going to be, but I have fun doing it because I love to think about a different word than another word that is going to be more inclusive, you know, that's going to be more affirming, that doesn't alienate people, but pulls more people in. So if I find out that, hey guys, is a problematic for a small group of people, I will change it to another word and not be inconvenienced, instead be like, wow, okay, what else can I say? This is fun.
I use y'all a lot and I'm from New England. So but when you're writing it,
I can't get there.
I can write it more than I can say it.
Yeah.
This is so great. These are the conversations that I have with like my close girlfriends and my book club. Like we're split on the them, they thing. And we have teachers that use the grammar excuse of like, it's not proper. And I'm like,
that's not true though.
About you. And
by the way, Merriman's Dictionary made it the word of the year and the word of the decade. And the Linguist Society also made it the word of the decade. So it is not only, that's completely incorrect because Merriman's Dictionary has validated they, them as, do you want to hear an interesting story? I just love history. They and them didn't exist until the Quakers. The Quakers refused to use they, thee, and thou because of the royalty, the royal British monarchy, and so they created they and them instead of thee and thou. So there was a time when they and them didn't even exist, but it was the Quakers who were like, no, sorry, I can do it.
Well, and I always say so to my teacher friends, I just say like, you see it in your classroom, the way that it makes your students feel when they feel included. And that's really all it is. Like, if you can do something that makes somebody in your classroom feel seen, why would you not do it? Again, it's an uncomfortable change in your grammar that you're conscious of. But if you say, hey, I'm going to give it a shot and do my best and, you know, catch me, just,
it gets easier every time after you start the journey. My husband, I was saying before everybody got on, probably could have learned French as resistant as he was to they, them, you know, not going to do it. Not right. And as an openly gay man, he's like, I ain't going to do it. Not right. Not right. And he is now. I started to see him now doing it, and it was so much resistance at first. And now I'm like, you're getting good at that. He's like, thanks. I started to practice. I started to think like, if this is going to make our friend feel more comfortable around us, it's important for me to do that. So he got past it, and now he's getting very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Anything new is uncomfortable. A new haircut's uncomfortable, and everything new is uncomfortable.
Yeah. And well, and you just also too, if you think about the productivity and the conversation that comes out of when you said it took you 18 months of sitting in a room where it really wasn't your place to talk. You were just there listening. It took 18 months for that trust to be there when then the conversation gets real and you start getting, and if you think about that from a business standpoint, don't you want everyone showing up with that energy and that authenticity to have these conversations? And they're not going to do that until they trust that their voice is equal or heard or whatever their perspective is part of that conversation. So if you just think about all that groundwork you're laying, to have someone really just bloom and be part of that.
That's right. Think about 46% of LGBTQ employees hide their identity at work. They hide it so imagine how much work goes into hiding your identity. How you have to think about which lie you told and all of that takes energy that you couldn't be more productive instead if you're just able to show up as your authentic self. And if you're to be able to do that and you felt really good about going to work, you felt like people saw you, they understood you, you're not going to leave the company. You're going to spend more time being productive. And that's ultimately, at a company, what it's about, wanting people to feel good about showing up.
But I always say this, just my story with the coming out as a gay man, I was able to be more authentic once it was okay that happened, which then allowed me to be a better listener rather than to be concentrating on what bullets I had to dodge at every given time. And I was able to do my job better.
That's right. That's
right.
Right.
Just more authentic. And to asking the pronoun question right up front and identifying that you care and that you just want to get that off the table and attended to, it just opens up the opportunity for a deeper dialogue, more engagement, more trust, and better outcomes. It's not that
That's
hard.
Right. That's right.
It's not that hard once you get over it being hard.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So Rob, I have a question for you. And I think this is a great question. I'm going to read it as is, but I think that also too, I don't know how versed you are with the franchise community, but I know Paul and I have had this discussion before in that the corporate entity of a brand can make a statement or not make a statement or direct franchisees what they can or can't say.
For sure.
So I'm going to ask you this question that is coming from someone that's on a corporate team. But I think if you also think about it from a layer of if I was a franchisee and asked this question about my brand. So she says, or they say, dang it, they said, I've been trying
Nice job.
I've been trying to initiate conversations with leadership within my company around inclusivity and celebrating Pride Month. I'd consider our workplace inclusive, but leadership is hesitant to make a statement in support of any political or social issues. How would you recommend starting the conversation around why recognition is important to the LGBTQ plus community?
I'm gonna say, first of all, I think that I don't think a company should make a statement around social issues unless the inside of their company is supportive of those statements. I think before making a statement publicly, I think you have to look around and say, do we have LGBTQ leadership? Do we have, people of color in leadership positions? Do we have a strategy to have a more diverse workforce? So I think, first of all, you got to take a look in the mirror and say, before we say anything, how do we look inside? And then I would say, marketers sometimes want to jump on things and do something, or sometimes they don't want to make any waves. I think that's okay too. I think, if your company is doing the right stuff inside, it doesn't, you don't have to go tell the rest of the world what you're doing if you do it right inside. And if you think about Pride itself, if I just focus on the LGBTQ or queer company community, I know queer is like a tough word, but it's a word used by young people. The more acronyms, pretty soon, it's actually right now LGBTQIA2S plus, adding Two Spirit. which so then you're like, okay, I'm gonna go to queer, but you can just do LGBTQ, let's say that. So much of it's focused in June, and so much of it's focused around parties and parades. And I'm like, there's so much more to who we are than parties and parades, and that it takes education throughout the year and give back as a component to start to really, in any community, any group of people, that's where the rubber hits the road, when you start to like really have a full comprehensive year strategy. The fact that we're doing this in December instead of June means so much more to me that we're having this conversation as opposed to kind of a performative action. So yeah, I would say
it's budgeting season. This is a time we can get people to put stuff in their budget for education.
No, I just think if let's say McDonald's leadership team doesn't want to say anything about the shooting at Colorado Springs, that's fine. But if it's deep in their values, if it's deeply embedded, then you want to say something and craft it in a way that's all of our corporations that said, this is what we want to say. How does this sound? I don't want any of our corporations to get in trouble on either side. I know that maybe some people on one side will be unhappy, but what I don't want is people on the side that I represent to be unhappy. So I read through a lot of press releases and statements to ensure that it's protecting. And I'm very protective of the companies that I work with and helping them craft the right language, but also saying like, hey, listen, have you donated, to this? If you haven't donated, I don't think you can make a statement, unless you put some money. I think that's, unless you've done something around that.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
The whole idea behind what you're doing is about inclusivity. And as soon as you make a statement, you're dividing people, because there's people that like it and there's people that don't like it. So
listen, Gen Zers looking under the hood too. They're looking under the hood. They're like, hey, wait a second, you said this. I'm looking under the hood, and I'm walking around the campus, and I'm looking and seeing very few diverse people. At least that you can see their diversity. There's hidden diversity, but at least you can see the diversity.
And I think we need to also be aware that that is shifting up or shifting over. We just hired a couple of new people on our team, and questions about DEI and embracing diversity were important questions on their side of the interview process. We want to see your values. We want to see what it says. What are you doing? It's not
you want to make it. You want to make a statement too when things happen. You want to like be there, but sometimes it's better to be quiet and say, we can't say anything till next year, and we need a strategy. Like, let's say Trans Week of Visibility, that happens in March. One of the companies we worked with said, hey, we want to do something next week for that. I said, you can't. You haven't done anything. You haven't given anything back. You've done no education. And so next year, if you want to do it, let's start talking now about how to do it.
Right. Well, it's also a journey.
I was going to say, Paul, keep going, but I just want to remind people we have 5 more minutes. So if you want to type your questions in, we're going to try and get to them. But also too, Paul, you keep going. But Rob, I'm just like jotting down things that you're saying that don't cost any money. And it's super easy stuff as far as having your customer service, asking people how do they prefer to be called. That's so easy and such a nice way to train people, and just like, oh, they're special. They're asking me what I want to be called at. That's an easy one. Dropping salutations from any of your mailings, your correspondence, that's super easy. And ways that we can be allies to our communities around us, or just letting people know like, hey, I don't necessarily see what you see from your perspective, but if I can help you bring it to light within our organization, come to me. Like, just making sure people know you have that. I don't have your lens, but I can help support your voice.
I would say mentoring up and down is important. So being a mentor for someone is really important. Somebody who's from a different group of people than you are. So being a mentor, if you're white, finding a person of color, but you also get taught too. Like, you will learn, so many parents are being taught by their kids, but at a company, you can actually have a relationship with someone where you're helping them, but they're really helping you back. And you're able to take your position and start to create change and impact.
Awesome. So, and one other, so the comment that came in before just said that how do you celebrate all the inclusivity and the different people you have in your community without alienating the binary community? So it's a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I always say everyone's welcome at Phluid, regardless of your race, your orientation, your gender, your body size, your ability, your age, your faith. There's a place for you if you come in with an open heart and an open mind and a willingness to embrace and accept people, that there's a place for everyone in our brand. And I always try to take whatever I'm talking about and expand it to be more inclusive as many people as possible. I always try to find a place where everybody wins, not just a group of people, because it's not about the 1% of trans non-binary people. It's about how do we start to deconstruct gender, and there's a direct correlation between men's violence and suicide rate based on the way we allow boys to deal with emotions. And there's a higher rate of eating disorders and other things based on girls and how we teach them to be. So how do we do a better job from the very beginning of letting kids just be themselves and find their way? And and then that's when you start to see things start to really blossom. 20, 30 years from now, we won't be talking about this at all.
That's exciting. What will we be talking
I mean,
about?
there'll always still be a male-female space because you're going to have two ends of the spectrum, but allowing the space in between and celebrating it. And somebody comes in and painting nails, being like, love your nails, nice, or if you don't like them, don't say anything. It's easy just to be like, whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
It'll be great when we just get to celebrate it.
Yeah.
Rather than have to spend the time and energy being advocating or activating. We just could all be allies because everything is sweet.
Well, look how far we've come. 25 years ago with this wedding ring, right? If I was invited to somebody's holiday party, they would say, oh my God, I would love for your wife to come as well. Yeah. And now people say, oh my gosh, I would love for your partner to come as well. We did that, and that was hard at first, and now it's natural because you just don't make an assumption that a wedding ring means a different gender. So yeah,
it's great. I was gonna say too, my daughter, whenever we see someone out that has kind of a non-traditional look about them, my daughter's attracted to that, and she'll say it, and she doesn't like talking to anybody, but she'll say, I love your hair, I love your nails, I love your makeup, and they just light up and they're like, thank you. That they want to be seen, and the best thing you can do is pay them a compliment if you like what you see.
They put the effort into it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Paul, do you have any wrapping up words? Because if not, the only thing I want to call out is the slides are great. Take your time to go through them. The slide about being an ally, I just love. And so hit it. It's got just very simple ways that you can behave, or just open your ears and shut your mouth when you need to. So I am excited that everyone's here for the conversation, and that Robbie joined us today to help.
Yeah. If I can wrap up, if anybody's interested in education, wants to, throw it to their parent company, it's we'll include this too. It's www.get, which is gender expansive training, get Phluid. And then if you want to make a donation to the Phluid Foundation, that's also an incredible way to push money back into grassroots organizations and support people who are doing work in small towns across the country, where $5,000 goes a long way. Their $20,000 goes a long way. It's really something I started. We just gave away $500,000 last week, which was incredible. And they're gifts, and people are blown away. So excited about that.
Congratulations. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to end with people of all. A lot of people are shopping right now, and so the Phluid Project. That's
our number one bestseller right now.
Yes,
Thank you for being kind. Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's great. It's a simple message. Be kind. Just be kind.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's a worthy.
Well, thank you so much for showing up, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in your communities, and hopefully we'll keep spreading the love and light in franchising as well. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Bye.